Susan, so you're just going to sit there and act like you have done nothing wrong. You don't even listen to me anymore. Daniel, listen to you? Are you kidding me? I bend over backwards for you, trying to make you happy, but it's never enough, is it? Susan, because you only do things when it's convenient for you. You don't actually care about how I feel. Daniel, that's not true. Don't tell me how to feel. I'm the one holding this family together while you constantly nitpick everything I do. Susan, oh, right. So you're the hero now. You're so busy being the victim, you don't even see how dismissive you've become. Daniel, I'm dismissive because I'm exhausted of always being attacked. You always have to be right, don't you? Susan, well, maybe if you actually showed me some respect, I wouldn't have to fight for it all the time. Do you see what's happening here? This isn't just a disagreement. It's two egos fighting for survival. Both are handing over their checklist, demanding, see me as caring, validate me as worthy, acknowledge that I'm right. Every unchecked box adds fuel for their defensiveness, turning a moment of potential connection into a battleground for identity control. This is how the ego hijacks communication and turns love into a scoreboard. Well, welcome to Mars Venus Coaching. I am your gender intelligence coach, Clay Smith. And on today's episode, we're going to take a look at the hidden agenda of the ego, examining how it beneficially shapes our instincts for survival, yet unconsciously sabotages the emotional connection in our relationships. We'll explore what the ego actually is, how it can serve and sabotage our relationships, and consider how those unchecked, ego-driven reactions often disconnect us from our significant other. We'll also ascertain a deeper understanding of the role that conscious awareness plays in allowing us to choose connection over self-protection. By the end of today's conversation, I want to equip you with 4 perspective changes, mindset shifts I call them, that are going to help reduce the damaging effects of the ego's hidden agenda. So before we can see all of these impacts the ego has on our relationships, let's first define what the ego actually is. For today's sake, we're going to define the ego as a survival mechanism. The ego crafts our identity and silently influences how we want to show up in the world with others, and especially in our relationship with our significant other. Leo Gura presents an incisive and no-nonsense understanding of the ego, which he frames through a lens of a whole self-inquiry, non-dual consciousness work. His perspective isn't just psychological, it's existential and spiritual as well. He defines the ego as a survival construct, a mental fabrication that imagines itself as a separate, autonomous self to preserve its own existence. It's not an object or a thing, rather a process of constant self-referencing. The ego is fundamentally imaginary, yet it feels real because it's the mechanism through which you experience yourself as a you. It's a protective illusion designed to distinguish me from not me, crafting identity through attachments, beliefs, stories, memories, roles. Because the ego is fueled from a self-survival construct, we're going to gain a deeper understanding of its hidden agenda to merely keep itself alive. The ego's number one top priority is self-survival at all cost. The ego's primary function is to ensure its continuity. It perceives existential threats not just to its physical harm, but threats to its identity, image, beliefs, and control. The ego also prioritizes control and manipulation of reality. It seeks to bend reality to fit its narratives. It manipulates people and situations and even its own perspectives to stay in control. It utilizes the reticular activating system in the brain to look for aspects in life that prove its point. If the ego feels threatened and sees the world as a dangerous place, its reticular activating system is now trained to look for any hint or evidence that the world is in fact unsafe. As Byron Katie says, the mind's job is to be right. The ego also prioritizes separation and superiority. In order to survive, ego needs to maintain separation. I am this, you are that. It often reinforces itself through comparison, competition, and judgment, striving to be better than or right. Ego also prioritizes the avoidance of truth. Ego fears radical truth because truth dissolves it. It will do anything to distract, rationalize, deny, distort reality to avoid awakening to its own illusory nature. Ego also prioritizes validation and significance. It craves external validation and seeks to be seen as special, important, or worthy. It feeds on attention, praise, recognition to stabilize its fragile sense of self. Later throughout this episode, I'll be walking you through an exercise to shed light on what your ego specifically craves in reference to validation. Leo also goes on to say that the ego is a survival program. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about continuing itself. Anything you think, say, do, and feel, these are all filtered through this hidden agenda. The problem is, you don't even know you're doing it. While the ego carries a reputation of being selfish or destructive, mind you, its original design serves a vital purpose. At its core, the ego is a survival mechanism. It's working tirelessly to protect and preserve and position you within your environment. Considering other aligned thinkers like Rupert Spira, Eckhart Tolle, the ego is not necessarily seen as inherently evil, but rather just a tool that evolved to help us create that illusion of separation, to help us navigate through others in the world. So let's now take a moment and consider what are some benefits to the ego. We're going to take a look at how the ego benefits our survival needs through more of an existential perspective. Ego benefits our survival needs first and foremost through identity construction. This social navigation, if you will, creates a me identity, presenting you with a personal name, a story, a role, a persona. This helps you navigate through social hierarchies, build relationships, and function in structured societies. Ego benefits our survival needs through boundary maintenance. The ego establishes boundaries between self and other, which is essential for protecting the body. It alerts you to potential threats, harm, or competition that might threaten your basic survival needs. Ego benefits our survival needs through control and predictability. As a security mechanism, it seeks to control outcomes, predict future scenarios to reduce uncertainty and risk. This control impulse serves a psychological shield against chaos. Ego also benefits our survival needs through motivation. It serves as an action catalyst. This ego generates either desires of what you're going to gain or possibly gives you some fears of what you could lose to motivate action. It's designed to kind of get you off your ass. This push-pull mechanism keeps you striving, achieving, or at the very least, avoiding harm. Ego also benefits our survival needs through providing us a sense of continuity. This is known as psychological stability. The ego maintains a narrative of a past and a future, giving us kind of a sense of continuity and coherence. Without this thread, daily life of where I come from, where I'm going, it would be confusing. It would be very disorienting. However, relying too heavily on this thread of a past future narrative typically tends to keep us stuck in the past. I'll talk more about that momentarily, but here's the existential twist. The ego is functionally useful for basic survival, but it becomes a trap when mistaken for your true self. It serves survival, but limits liberation. To help us better understand the ego's role in benefiting our survival needs, I want to provide you with 3 basic practical examples of how our ego steps up to the plate to save our ass. It takes the stage of an interview persona, crafting a strategic identity when walking into that job interview. The ego becomes your personal brand manager. It curates your words, your posture, your appearance to shape that hiring manager's perspective of you. Maybe projecting competence, reliability, ensuring that you're going to be a good cultural fit. While this may involve emphasizing certain strengths or perhaps downplaying certain weaknesses, this isn't merely vanity. It's a strategic survival mechanism designed to secure employment, income, social status. These are all essential for one's material security and societal belonging. The key concept is the ego engineers perceived value aligned with external expectations to ensure access to resources and opportunities. In other scenarios, it becomes a social shield when needed, protecting emotional vulnerability. Imagine being in a small group of people where a controversial topic arises. The ego instinctively evaluates social dynamics, calculating which opinions might be safe to express and which might be risky. Rather than risking ostracism or conflict, the ego might filter your responses, keeping you within the boundaries of group acceptance. This protective modulation of self-expression ensures staying connected to the tribe, an ancient survival need for protection and cooperation. The key concept here is that the ego acts as a social shield, preserving harmony, safeguarding your position within the collective system. In our relationships, the ego can put on the hat of being our relationship protector. It keeps us emotionally secure by motivating us to establish and maintain healthy boundaries with those around us. Imagine you're in a relationship, a romantic relationship, and your partner crosses a personal boundary of yours, perhaps by speaking to you harshly in public. The ego immediately registers a sense of threat to your self-respect, your dignity, and rather than reacting impulsively, A healthy egoic response might be to motivate you to assertively express your feelings and reestablish some boundaries. In this example, the ego isn't inflating itself with dominance, it's just acting as a guardian of your personal integrity, ensuring mutual respect within the relationship. Also, in this scenario, the ego functions as a boundary architect, ensuring the individuality isn't dissolved in the pursuit of connection. It negotiates where you end and the other begins. This is necessary for long-term relational harmony. These examples all highlight that while spiritual teachings often emphasize transcending the ego, in practical life, the ego is orchestrating micro strategies for your survival, security, and social mobility. The challenge is not to eradicate the ego, just to become aware of when it serves survival and when it blocks authenticity and connection. So while the ego serves that essential role in safeguarding your survival, its protective instincts do come with a hidden cost. When left unchecked, these same survival strategies can erode trust, stifle connection, and silently sabotage our most important relationships. So we're going to take a look at the toll the ego can have in communicating with that one person out of the 8.24 billion on the planet who's most important to you. The ego creates an illusion of separation. It fosters a constant sense of me versus you. This illusion of separation halts genuine empathy, creating walls instead of bridges. Without this sense of separation, oneness allows an opportunity to take over the relationship. With this separation, it becomes a not my circus, not my monkeys mentality. I struggle with relating to my spouse because, well, that's not my problem. That's theirs. I'm better than that. As a result, disconnection, isolation, chronic misunderstanding infiltrate our connection with one another. Have you ever wondered why your partner just doesn't ever understand you? Or perhaps you've heard them frequently complain that you don't show them enough empathy? Perhaps consider the ego's impact, stifling your connection. 2. The ego creates a need to be right. It would rather win an argument than resolve it. It prioritizes personal significance over mutual understanding. Couples often misconstrue arguments as resolving conflicts. Just because you had the same argument about the same thing multiple times doesn't mean the issue actually got resolved. It may have turned into a mud-flinging contest about who's wrong, who's right, and who's going to win the fight, but as a result, power struggles, defensiveness, and emotional gridlock saturate the relationship like a lingering stench. As my coach always says, would you rather be right or be happy? Can't have both. 3. The ego also creates a fear of vulnerability. It perceives vulnerability as a weakness, crafting emotional armor to protect itself. It resists intimacy because it's going to protect itself from potentially getting hurt again. As a result, emotional distance, superficial connection, and halted physical intimacy prevail. I plan to do a whole other episode on vulnerability in the future, so feel free to keep an eye out for that. 4. The ego also creates a dynamic of conditional or transactional love. It offers love with hidden terms. I'll love you if you behave how I expect. I'll accept you if you believe what I believe. It turns relationships into unspoken contracts of validation. The result of this transactional love leads to manipulation, resentment, and unmet expectations. Go see my other episode on purposeful partnerships to ascertain a more in-depth understanding of how scorekeeping permeates a partnership with resentment. In that episode, I offer practical steps to transcend surface level partnerships into cultivating partnerships rooted in conscious intention, emotional intelligence, and shared vision. It's an invitation to move beyond outdated roles and co-create a partnership dynamic where both people are empowered to grow and contribute together. 5. The ego also creates identity attachments. It attaches to roles like the victim or the achiever and resists any shifts in self-image. When these identities are threatened, they react with fear or oftentimes aggression. When your significant other threatens to disagree with your checkboxes, that's when you get defensive. The result? Rigidity and an inability to grow together. 6. The ego creates resistance to the present moment. It obsesses over past wounds or future anxieties, pulling you out of the now. It perpetuates a mental noise which clouds presence. These habits or cycles of mental rumination, replaying scenarios, going over fights in your heads, fears that you're thinking might become a reality, all of this mental rumination feed the ego's need to stay in control. The result is missing genuine connection and inevitably fostering unnecessary conflict. I love what Katie has to say in regards to ruminating on a past future. She says, if you want a little fear and terror, get a future. And if you like a little guilt and shame, get a past. She often uses this line to illustrate how the mind's attachment to a past or a future generates suffering. But whereas peace exists only in the present moment. So, what does your ego identity checklist look like? Let's shed some light on what your ego values by going through this ego identity checklist. So I want you to pause for a moment, grab a pen and paper, or open up a fresh note on your phone. And as we go throughout these checkboxes, one by one, I encourage you to actively check off the identities that feel important to you. These are ways that you want to be seen by your spouse, your family, your friends, your boss, your coworkers, and even your wider community. This isn't about judgment. It's about building an awareness of how your ego shapes the image that you want to give to others. So how do you want to be seen? What about in your romantic relationships? Do you want your partner to think of you as strong, loving, desirable, respected, emotionally intelligent, supportive, or the one who's always right in conflict? How do you want to be seen with your family members? Do you want to be seen as a good mom, successful, a reliable person, someone who's morally upright, appreciated, independent, or the one who stays together through tough times? How about among your friends? Do you want to be seen as fun, loyal, maybe witty, the wise one who offers the good advice, important to the group, compassionate, or maybe just someone others admire as a role model? What about at work or with your boss? Do you want to be seen as competent, indispensable, a leader, trustworthy to clients, innovative, hard-working, or someone who's accomplished and respected by their peers? What about in your wider community? Do you want to be seen as generous, influential, spiritually conscious, authentic, put together, or inspiring to others? To help you make this more personal, I've attached a list of all of these identity descriptors for you to go through. I encourage you to print it out, take a few moments to put your ego on paper. Because here's the truth. We can't change what we're not aware of. This simple exercise will give you a visual map of how your ego wants to be seen across these areas of your life. And again, this isn't about judging these desires. It's just shining light on them, so they're no longer running your relationships from behind the scenes. So as you're writing down your ego identity checklist, it's also important to consider how gender intelligence plays a subtle yet powerful role in shaping how you want to be seen. So understanding these gender-driven checkboxes, whether masculine or feminine, it's going to give you more of a deeper awareness of why certain validations feel more urgent and how they quietly influence the ways that you want to show up in your relationships. So let's just take a look at some of those. Some masculine ego identity desires might have some of these checkboxes on their list. Competent and capable. Do you want to be seen as someone who can handle almost anything? Strong and resilient. Do you want to be viewed as tough, both mentally or physically? A provider and protector. Do you want your value to be recognized about how well you provide or protect your family? Respected and honored. Would you rather be seen as respected rather than just being liked? Independent and autonomous. Are you trying to avoid appearing needy? Successful or accomplished? Are achievements and status core to how you want to be perceived? Or perhaps logical and rational? Do you want to be seen as level-headed or clear thinking? Any that apply to you, add them to your ego identity checklist. Now, considering on more of the feminine side, some feminine ego identity desires might have some of these things on their checklist. Maybe it's loved and cherished. Do you want to feel chosen and emotionally valued? Perhaps it's attractive and desirable. Do you invest heavily in appearance-boosting products? Perhaps it's nurturing and caring. Do you need others to see your true heart and emotional generosity? Maybe it's included and connected. Do you want to feel included, part of the inner circle? And that reminds me, guys, remember, ladies have a genuine intrinsic desire to feel included. Also, emotionally intelligent. Maybe we would add that to the list if you want to be seen as someone who understands feelings. Perhaps it's supportive and helpful. You'd add that to your list. Would you want others to value your ability to uplift and support them? Or maybe it's just balanced and graceful. Do you want to be seen as someone people admire? They look up to you. Any that apply to you, add to your ego identity checklist. Both genders seek validation, but the currency of that validation differs. Men tend to ego identify through performance, capability, and needing that respect. Women tend to ego identify through relational value, emotional connection, and being cherished. When these checkboxes go unchecked, defensiveness patterns often play out in gender specific ways. Men typically tend to shut down to regain that respect, while women typically tend to over explain to regain that connection. Notice where your checkboxes tend to pile up. These are the areas where your ego is most invested in shaping how others see you. And remember, this isn't inherently bad. The goal is awareness. And as you become more aware of your personal ego identity checklist, the ways that you want other people to see you, it's important to recognize a subtle but damaging dynamic that often plays out in relationships. You see, psychologically, we tend to hand our loved ones this invisible checklist, silently expecting them to think, feel, say, or believe certain things about us. Our ego needs them to validate these attributes without ever voicing it out loud. Remember, the ego's job is to preserve its survival. Needing your boss to see you as an effective employee. Needing your spouse to view you as an excellent partner. Needing your child to see you as a good dad. All of these aspects advance your survival, but they create a strain on your relationship simultaneously. When our sense of self-worth is dependent on our partner consistently checking our boxes, we place the relationship under quite a strain. You see, every unchecked box becomes a perceived threat. Resentment builds. Conversation becomes filtered through a lens of seeking approval. And over time, the relationship shifts from genuine connection to an unspoken transaction of validation. Defensiveness is often a byproduct of this ego identity checklist. You see, the very word defensive has its root in the word defend, which means to protect from harm, attack, or perceived threats. When we become defensive in communicating with our partner, it's often because a part of what they said, a part of our identity, the way that we want them to see us, feels under threat. And here's what's really happening beneath the surface. We've quietly handed over our checklist, expecting them to check every box. Hey, see me as strong. Validate me as intelligent. Acknowledge that I'm a good mom. But when one of those boxes goes unchecked, whether through a passive-aggressive comment they alluded to, whether through an action, or maybe just their silence, the ego reacts. It feels exposed, vulnerability, and in need of protection. Being dependent on how your partner thinks a certain way of us is the thread is tied to our survival. When our partner disapproves of us harshly, yeah, it could start a fight. That fight could lead to a big argument, could create a massive rift in the relationship, could spark a separation, could result in a divorce, could threaten asset division, might cost you valuable time with your kids due to court-ordered custody battles. That's when defensiveness kicks in. We hire the best emotional defense attorney that we can afford. We argue, justify, try and prove ourselves. Not just to win the point, but to reassert control over how we're being perceived. Defensiveness becomes the ego's shield to attempting to reclaim its identity by pressuring our partner to check the boxes we feel they've missed. But at what cost? Authentic communication now gets replaced with the ego's preservation. The relationship dynamic changes from connection to protecting yourself. If you're noticing how defensiveness shows up in your relationship, I really highly encourage you to check out my earlier episode where we took a little bit deeper look into the mechanics of defensiveness. It's entitled The First Act of War. In that episode, I break down how defensiveness is a reflex of the ego's need to protect its identity and how that erodes trust, connection between two people. More importantly, I walk you through practical steps to recognize when you're being defensive and how to shift from ego protection to conscious communication. Now that we're becoming aware of the ego identity checklist and how it shapes our reactions, the next steps is learning how to shift our perspectives. I want to share with you 4 mindset shifts that will help you recognize when your ego is driving the conversation. These shifts are going to help reduce the need for external validation, eliminate the defensiveness that is creating distance between you and that one person that you chose to spend the rest of your life with. So let's listen up. Mindset shift number 1. Remember, whose business are you in? One of the most transformational mindset shifts that comes from Katie's work about the 3 kinds of business. I think she talks about this in her book, Loving What Is. She talks about there's 3 kinds of business. There's my business, your business, and God's business. And that's the God of your understanding. My business is simply anything that's within my control. My thoughts, feelings, actions, decisions, all of that. Your business is anything that belongs to someone else. Opinions, reactions, beliefs, perceptions, feelings, all of that. God's business is simply anything outside of human control. Life events, circumstances, weather, nature, or just unfoldings of things that we have no control over or can't dictate. Katie explains that every time we experience stress or anxiety or defensiveness, we are mentally in someone else's business. When we hand our partner over our ego identity checklist and expect them to think, say, or feel or believe a certain way about us, we're stepping into their business, trying to manage their opinions about who they think we are. But here's the trap. When we're in their business, who's in ours? No one. We abandoned ourselves. The more we try to control how someone else perceives us, the less present we are in our own thoughts and emotions and personal integrity. This is where the ego thrives, by pulling you out of your self-awareness and into managing external validations. Letting go of the need for someone to check your boxes isn't about apathy. It's about returning to your own business, where you can stay in your power to show up authentically without attachments to controlling others' perceptions of you. Mindset shift number 2. Recognize the difference between caring and controlling. You might be thinking, but Clay, isn't what my partner thinks about me my business? I mean, what if they think I'm a terrible person and they threaten to leave me because of how they see me? Shouldn't I care? That's a very natural and valid concern. But here's the nuance. Katie's teaching on whose business are you in isn't about ignoring or dismissing your partner's feelings or the health of the relationship. It's 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 understanding that your partner's opinions of you absolutely matter because they impact your shared life together and your emotional connection. However, the key is recognizing the difference between caring about them and trying to control them. It's healthy to care about your partner's feelings and want to work together, building mutual respect and understanding, but it's not healthy to feel responsible to manage or control how they think about you in order to feel worthy or secure. When your sense of self worth hinges entirely on their perception of you, you're taking away your power and you're inviting anxiety and defensiveness in its place. If they know that you're hot and bothered, if they don't think a certain way about you, that's your Achilles heel. All they got to do is pull that card out of the hand and say, "Hey, do this for me, or I think you're going to be a piece of shit." You don't want them to think a certain way about you, so now you're a slave to their thoughts. Instead, focus on what you can control: your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your personal integrity, your growth. Build your sense of self worth from within so that even if your partner's opinions of you wavers, you remain grounded. This balance creates a stronger and more authentic relationship, one where you can truly show up without the fear of losing yourself in the process. Mindset shift number 3: the peace of allowing others to be wrong about you. One of the most liberating shifts to get out of others people's business is realizing this truth. It's okay if someone you love thinks something about you that might not be fair or true or kind. You don't have to argue every misperception. You don't need everyone to get you in order to be at peace with them. This doesn't mean you're passive or you allow yourself to be mistreated. We can still have boundaries. It means you recognize that other people's opinions belong to them. Their perceptions are often filtered through their own ego identity checklist, their own personal wounds, their own stories. Like Katie says, no two people have ever met. And when we give up the need to constantly correct, defend, or prove ourselves, we reclaim that energy that was being wasted on managing someone else's opinions. Ironically, the inner peace that comes from changing that dynamic. When you're no longer energetically pushing for that validation, the relationship has space for authenticity to emerge. I love Katie offers a prayer in her philosophy on needing approval. She says, if I had a prayer, it would be this: God, spare me from the desire for love, approval, and appreciation. Amen. That prayer is a powerful mantra of surrender. It's not about rejecting love or not being able to receive appreciation, but rather about letting go of neediness or attaching to what somebody thinks of you. True connection isn't built by perfectly managing someone's opinion of you. It's built by being at peace with yourself, even if others don't see you clearly. Mindset shift number 4: the gift hidden and criticism. Another powerful shift is learning to extract value from criticism, especially when it threatens to leave your ego checkboxes unchecked. When a loved one makes a remark that might be negative or misaligned with how you want to be seen, the ego's reflex is to defend, justify, push back to control their perspective of you. But what if you came at it from another perspective? Instead of focusing on changing their perspective, you paused and asked yourself, is what they're saying about me, even if it's completely unkind, could they be right? Is there a little portion of what they said that might be somewhat true? Is there a lesson here, even if it was a little bit uncomfortable to hear? Criticism often comes wrapped in negative emotions, but inside there's some bit of a perspective or a nugget of wisdom that possibly could gain value from. When you receive criticism without needing your partner to validate your identity, you move away from ego defending to ego refining. You allow the relationship to be a mirror for your growth, not a battleground for your image. One of my favorite quotes that reminds me of this mindset shift is by a holistic psychotherapist named Leland Van Valdewal. He said, "The degree to which a person can grow is directly proportional to the amount of truth they can accept about themselves without running away." That quote is just so apropos in the context of receiving criticism. So let's revisit that fight from Daniel and Susan earlier this episode. We saw Susan's plea for help wrapped in blame, criticism, resentment. We saw Daniel's reaction clouded by defensiveness and counterblame. Now imagine equipping them with an awareness of the impact of their ego identity checklist and how that impact negatively sabotages their ability to ask one another for help. Helping them recognize that when two people can leave their ego at the door, it creates a space for connection and mutual support. Let's recreate that scene. Choosing connection over control. Now, in this scene, Susan might still start off unconsciously frustrated out of a stance of needing that support, but might not sure how to initiate that conversation. But let's just notice the different direction it goes. In your own life, even if your partner starts a fight with defensiveness, you can still choose to set your ego identity checklist aside and prioritize connection over being right. So let's revisit that. Susan. Oh, so you're just going to sit there and act like you did nothing wrong. You don't even listen to me anymore. Daniel. I could feel how upset you are. And you're right. I've been distant lately. I want to understand what's going on. Susan. You only do things when it's convenient for you. You don't actually care about how I feel. Daniel. I hear you. It probably feels like I don't care when I shut down or pull away. That's not what I want for us. Help me understand how I can best support you. Susan. I just want to feel like I matter to you. Like you actually want to be here. Not just checking something off the box. Daniel. You do matter to me. more than I probably will ever show. I can see how my actions haven't made you feel that way. And I want us to keep moving past this. Let's figure something out together. Did you notice the change? The ego checklist was still triggered, but it took one person to make a conscious decision to stay in their own business, listening instead of defending, staying present instead of proving themselves. When defensiveness is shows up, even in the heat of the moment, in that big fight, that creates space for vulnerability to surface. We can shift from going to that defensive route to being vulnerable instead. This is how we change from ego-driven reactions to heart-centered connection, one decision at a time. Again, it only takes one person to have a healthy relationship, and tag, you're it. So as we wrap up today's conversation, I want to bring this all together. You've now seen how ego, the invisible identity manager, shapes how we want to be seen in the world. It's not inherently bad. In fact, it's vital. It serves a purpose in protecting and keeping you alive, helping you navigate through life, your relationships, and everyday challenges. But when left unchecked, it turns into a barrier. It divides you. It keeps you from the very person you love. And as you ask yourself and keep proving, defending yourself and getting caught up in that ego battle, just take a moment and pause and just say, which check boxes is my ego wanting my partner to check off? And maybe I feel threatened that they didn't. Ask yourself, whose business am I in? Trying to get them to check all of my boxes. How can I pull my energy back, be in my business, and receive their criticism as a gift in helping me be a better partner, improve my parenting skills, work on my health a little bit, whatever their critical remark was? The truth is, connection and ego-driven validation cannot coexist. That's why these mindset shifts that we explore today, staying in your own business, letting go of the need to control however they think of you, being okay if somebody disagrees or thinks you're a certain way that might not be true, receiving feedback as a gift. These aren't just philosophical, airy-fairy ideas. These are practical tools to help you stay present, drop defensiveness, and foster authentic connection over control. So here's my challenge for you. The next time you feel the urge to defend, to protect, to hand somebody over your checklist, pause, take a breath, choose connection over control. It only takes one person to break that ego cycle and invite real intimacy back into the room. Listen, don't be like the couple who, when asked to leave their ego at the door, continued to have the fight outside on the porch for 3 hours waiting for the other person to go in first. I get it. We've all been there, haven't we? If you're ready to put these tools into practice, I encourage you to take that ego identity checklist, print it out, fill it out. You'll be amazed at how quickly your partners starts to mirror your non-defensiveness just from having an identity of, oh wow, my ego wants this, and my ego values that, and my ego wants to be right, and my ego wants to be cool. Just creating an awareness starts to change that process. So I highly recommend you apply this in your relationship with your significant other. If you'd like to book a complimentary clarity session with me, To gain some further insights on how we can apply this principle, feel free to click the link below, set up a time that works best for you. I'd love to connect with you, see how I can better provide you clarity on improving your relationships. Also, if you received value from today's episode, please click that like button, hit subscribe. I try and pop out a new relationship tool once a month at least. And if you have been implementing this relationship tool in your life, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments section below. Let's stay connected, not just in words, but in how we choose to see and hear others beyond the ego's checklist. Because the real depth of your relationship isn't found in being right. It's found in creating a space where defensiveness ends and true understanding can begin.